Hello, welcome to Full Stack Programming, and this is a crash course on Alpine.js. What is Alpine.js? It is a small reactive framework perfect for adding quick interactive elements to your web pages. It's ideal for features like modals, dropdowns, tooltips, tabs, and simple forms. It's lightweight, simple, and lets you manage JavaScript behavior directly in HTML with minimal setup. When to use Alpine.js? Alpine.js shines for projects needing light interactivity like toggles, form validation, or simple widgets, without the need for complex state management. If you're building a full app, you might need to reach for a full framework like Vue, React, or Angular. But for smaller tasks, Alpine.js is faster and more straightforward. So let's jump into the code and let's get started with Alpine.js. So I'm going to begin by creating a new folder for our project. I'm going to call it Alpine Crash Course, and I'm going to open that up in my text editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Alpine's website. It's alpinejs.dev, and we're going to click Get Started. And let's copy this starter template for an Alpine project, and let's create a new file and paste that in. And I'm using this live server extension in Visual Studio Code. It's called live server. So I'm going to run this, and sure enough, we see I love Alpine, which means that our Alpine is working correctly. And now we can go ahead and start. So let's look at a practical example of how interactivity works. So we're going to start with creating a counter. So in order to initialize an Alpine component, all you need to do is add x data, and then this expects an object, and you can provide the data that the component is going to use inside of this. So let's say that we have a count property here, and we're going to initialize that by 0. And then we will simply let's give it a simple counter, and so let's do an h3. And in order to output the value of a variable of inside of the data, we use x text, and then use pass the name of the variable. And now if we go back, we see that 0 is here. Now if we change the value, we can see that it changes. Okay, now let's add two buttons here. So I'm going to add a button for actually say increment, and another for decrement. And in order to listen to the click event, what we can do is we can use the x hyphen on colon click equals, and what we can do a couple of things here. We can, if it's a simple operation, like if we wanted to like we're going to do for this, if we wanted to like increment or decrement, or it's a single expression, we can put it right here. So we can do count plus plus, and for decrement, what we will do is we'll say count minus minus. And if we go back now, if we do increment, decrement, and that's it. And what we can do is, instead of doing x on, we can use at click, which is going to do essentially the same thing. So it works just as it did before. Now let's look at how we can use methods for responding to events. So let's add a new button here. We'll call it reset, and add a new event listener for this, and we will say reset. Now this is a function, and we need to define that function inside of our x data. So all we just need to do is create a simple function and say this dot count equals 0. So basically what it does is it will reset it to 0. If we do increment and do reset, it's going to go back to 0. Decrement, reset, and it's going to set it to 0. Okay, so now that we have seen a simple example of Alpine in action, let's get rid of this and go back to a clean slate. And let's talk about some important directives that Alpine has. So the first one we're going to look into is the X data directive that we have already seen. This is used to create an Alpine component, and what it is that you provided a value of which is essentially an object with some data properties and some methods that you can call on some event. So let's say that if we had a message property here and it said hello world, and we can use that using another directive that we're going to see. I think we've already seen that. So if we like create a span here and say x text, so this is to output the value of a variable or a property in the component. So I'm going to say message. So and if we go back, we should see the message here. And so this covers the two directives, xData and xText. Now we also have another directive which is called xhtml. So what happens is, like, if we had like a some HTML in this, so so let's say if we wanted hello to be bold and we had x text, and if we go back, it's going to just escape those HTML elements, and it's going to just output it like that. But if you wanted to render the HTML, then you can just use xhtml directive. Okay, so we've seen xdata, xhtml, and xtext. Now let's see the xshow directive. And basically what it does is that it allows you to conditionally render elements. So let's say that I had a visible Boolean property here, which was set to false. And what we can do is add a paragraph here. And let's say lorem, actually let's do lorem 10 to have a smaller. And what we can do now is use xshow to conditionally render it, and we're going to use the visible this value here. So if it's true, then it's going to show, otherwise it's not. So if we go back, we don't see it, and if we do true, we do see it. And now let's see it, add a button here, and we can, let's call it toggle, and let's do click. And actually this is X on directive, like we see earlier. So basically what it does is, you pass in an event, the name of an event, and when that occurs, when you click on it, or when you hover your mouse over it, then it's going to be triggered. So let's say that we want to set the visible value to not visible. Okay, so whatever it is, it's going to flip it. So if we go back and if we click toggle, it's going to change the visible value to from true to false, and then false to true. Okay, so now we have also seen X on. We can also, let's say, use a mouse enter event. So if we could just go and do this. No, I'm not clicking on it. I'm just, entering my mouse into its area, and then it just toggles it. All right, and let's see the next directive, which is xbind. Okay, so what it does is essentially it allows you to dynamically bind the value of an attribute on an element. So to demonstrate that, let's create an anchor here, and let's say that we want to say Google, and we want to have a property here for URL, and we can say https google.com. And if we just do URL here, it's not going to work. We just need to do x bind colon and then the name of the attribute. So then it's going to bind the value for that attribute, the value that you provide here. Okay, so we do x dash bind and then the name of the attribute. So if you go back, refresh, and if I click this, it should take us to Google. So which means that the value is being bound correctly. Right, and now let's we have already looked at the x on directive. So yeah, now let's look at another one, which is the, so let's create a property called name, and I'm going to put in my name. And so what this does is, it allows you to do two-way data binding with an input field. Okay, so let's first echo out. Oh, I'm using my PHP terminologies. So let's use xtext to output the value of that. So we see that here. And now let's add let's add a line break and an input. And in order to bind the value of this input to this, we use the x model directive, and we pass in the name of the property that we want to bind it to. And if we go back, we see the value of that variable inside here. And if we type something here, it's going to update it. So this is quite neat. You just add two directives here, and you get two-way data binding. And then we have the xinit directive, and what it does is you put it on the element where you're initializing the component. And actually let's bring this on this one line. And actually, if you if you just remove that, then adding just x data means that this is a valid Alpine component, and you don't need to have you don't need to pass an object. Okay, so you can just do x data. And so the next directive is xinit, which is kind of like a hook where you can whenever this component is initialized, it's going to trigger this expression, whatever we put inside of it. So let's say that we take the current time, and actually for that, let me just create the property here, and I'm going to just say time. And then when we initialize it, I will do time equals new date, and then we'll do to locale time string. So this is just going to take the current time and put it inside of this variable. And then here we can just create a paragraph and use xtext to output it. And if we go back, we see the current time here. And that's what you can use the, and if you refresh, I think the seconds should increment. Yeah, let's see it go to 31. Yep. Right. So this is what you would use xinit for. You can also, call a function on the component, method on the component inside of here as well. And the next one is going to be the next directive is going to be, let's say that we want to use the x effect. So what this essentially does is it's kind of watches the values that are here, and whenever the value changes, the data of the component changes, this is called. yeah, so let's look at this. So let's create the count example again, and let's add a button here, and let's just do x text count, and when we click it, we want it to do count plus plus. Yes, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually do console.log and say x effect called, and we can just output the value. And now if we go back, let me open up the console. And if we click on it, you can see that this is being called. And whenever the value is changing, when we click on the button. All right, so that was X effect. Now, okay, so the next directive that we're going to look at is X transition. So let's quickly set that up. I'm going to get rid of this, and actually let's keep the button because we're going to have a toggle button here. Toggle, let's say visible, and let's make it false. And let's add a paragraph here. So I'm going to show it conditionally using the X show. Now let's add log 10. I think we are good, except we need to add the click listener, and we're going to use visible, not visible when you click it. So it's going to essentially toggle this. Okay, so now if you wanted a transition, you can do a X transition directive on the element that is, being shown and hidden. So if we add that, and when we do toggle, it's going to, add a transition to it. And yeah, so that's X transition. Okay, so let's remove this. And there's something that I want to show you what that happens with X show is that, it conditionally renders it. Basically, what by conditional rendering, I mean that, it hides the element. The element is not removed from the DOM. So if we go and inspect the elements, and if we go over here, we can see that we have that paragraph right here. It's just set to display none, and when we toggle it, it's set to display block. So that's what's happening. Now let's look at the next directive, which is xif, which what it does is that it removes the element entirely from the DOM instead of just toggling its the display property. So but in order to do that, we can't just do xif visible because that is not going to work. So if we refresh and do toggle, so it's going to give us this error. It's not very descriptive, but what you need to know is that we need something, a special tag called the template tag. And that's where you can put your xif directive, and then the element that you want to, add or remove from the DOM, you put it inside of that. So now if we go back and if we toggle, so it works just like that. But now if we look at the elements, and if we toggle, yeah, you can see that the paragraph element is added and removed when you toggle. So this is xif. And now let's look at the next directive, which is x4. So what x4 does is, in order to demonstrate that, is it iterates over an array. So let's say that we had an items array, okay, which had, let's say, milk, eggs, and bread. So some breakfast items. And let's get rid of this as well. So let's say that we wanted to create an ordered list with these items. So what we can do is we can create a UL here, and then we want to add a list item for each of these. So for that, we're going to use x4, And just like xif, you need a template tag for that. So we do x4 and you say item in and then the list items. So it doesn't have to be item, it's just a variable name. It can be anything, it can be just I or whatever. It's just a variable. So and inside what we want to render, that is going to be a list item, and we want to render the name of the item. And now if you go back, we should see it. And that's how we use x4 to iterate over lists. Now this can be like a list of objects, and when you do x4, it's going to give you that object, and then you can access properties on that object. So that's how you use x4. And now let's look at another example that uses both x4 and xif. And so let's say that we had let me just bring this onto a new line. Let's say that we had a list of tasks, and we had these objects. Let's say title, buy groceries, and a completed property. Let's say true, and let me just copy these over and finish project. Let's make this false. Let's say read a book, and let's keep it as true. So we have this tasks array here, and let's have a add a list here. So let's add a heading, let's say tasks, and we're going to use, so we're going to add a new template tag here to put our x4 in, and we'll say for task in our tasks, we want an li, which is going to be the title of the task. And sure enough, we see our to-do list. And now let's say that we want to show either the completed or the incomplete tasks. So let's add a button here. But before that, let's add a property. Let's say show completed, and let's say true. And we're going to add a button here. Let's say toggle completed, and let's add a click handler, and this is just going to toggle this property. And here, now what we're going to do is that we're going to add a template to add our xif, and inside of this we'll say if task.completed is equal to show completed, then we want to show this li, otherwise we don't. Yeah, so by default it's the two tasks that are completed are showing here. If you toggle that, it's going to show only the one that is not completed. Yep. So this is a slightly complex example of using Alpine.js to create a component. Now let's look at some event modifiers. So let's get rid of this component and start fresh. Okay, so event modifiers are used to change the default behavior of events, allowing finer control. And Alpine supports the prevent, stop, and once modifiers. So let's take a look at how we can use event modifiers. So let's say we have an Alpine component which has a message property, and we're going to create a form and to add a button of type submit. It defaults to submit, but let's explicitly say it. And here what we can do is we're actually not going to use that, but we're going to use the submit event. And what we want to do is that when this form is submitted, we want to set the message to form submitted, and then down here we want to show that message in a paragraph. Oh, sorry. So we'll do message. All right. So you would think that, it should happen like, when we click an element and we use add click, and then we, change the value of the variable, or we call a method. This should work. Like, when the form is submitted, it's going to be called. And so let's see how it works. So if we go here and we click submit, so you see a flicker of that, message, and then the page just reloads. Yeah, you see? So what is happening here is that the when you submit a form, it redirects the page to the action of the form. And since we didn't provide an action, it's going to go to, I guess, the same page. So for this, if you are familiar with like vanilla JavaScript, what you do is, you take the event object and you call prevent default on it. But Alpine, gives you a neat way to modify this event. And to do that, all you have to do is say dot prevent. So this is going to prevent this form from being submitted. And then it's just going to carry out this. So if we go back and we click submit now, you can see that the form is submitted. The event is called, but the page is not reloaded. So this is how you can use the prevent modifier. So now let's look at the stop modifier. And to do that, let's get rid of all of this and start fresh. So to demonstrate that, what we're going to do is we're going to add a button here which says click me. And what it should do is it should set the message to something. And we'll set the message to button clicked. And let's output the message here. We'll say x text equals message. And sure enough, when we click it, we get the button clicked message. Now let's say that we add a click listener to the div that contains the button. So when we click the button, the event is going to propagate up to the div as well. So let's say here we say that div is clicked. Yeah, so if we click now, so this event is, so this handler is triggered. So it says button clicked, and then it goes up, the event is propagated, and it moves to the parent that contains that element, and then it renders div is clicked. Now, if we wanted to prevent this, or rather stop this from happening, that when the event comes here, so it doesn't propagate further up the chain. So in order to do that, we can use the stop modifier. And if we go back now, when we do click, it says button clicked, but it doesn't propagate up. So this is where you would use the stop modifier. Now let's look at the once modifier. So what this does is it only triggers the listener once. So let's say that we had a count, and let's set that to 0. And here we're going to output the count, and let's get rid of this. Okay. So here, what we're going to do is increment the count. And let's change that to increment. So if we click this, it's going to increment, but when we click it again, it's not going to work. So this is just going to, allow you to click that once. And the subsequent clicks won't trigger the event handler again. Now, let's look at how we can use some special events like key down. So to do that, let's go back to our message example. And here we're going to add an input, and let's bind. Actually, we don't need to bind that. We just need to show the message here. So we'll say px text equals message. And here, what we can do is we can say key down, and then we can use the modifier of the key that you want. So we can specify the enter key, and we'll say message equals you pressed enter. Yep. So if you go here and we press enter, it says you pressed enter. And yeah, so that's how you can listen for special key events on a text field. And we can also let's say if you wanted to listen for the escape key, and let's say you pressed escape, and if we press escape, press anything else, and when you press escape, it triggers this event. And so let's look at creating a slightly practical example using what we have learned so far about these event modifiers. So let's create a search simulator. So I'm going to have two properties here, and I'm going to add an input, and let's take these attributes to the next line to make it more readable. So we're going to bind the query to this input, and we're going to say keyDown.enter. When this happens, we want the message to change to searching for, and then we can just add the query here. So and let's add the message here, and let's run it. So if you're here and we type something, and when we press enter, it simulates that we're searching for the query that you entered. Say ABC, searching for ABC. So yeah, this is, I guess, a small example of using these event modifiers for keys. All right, so let's get rid of this, and let's start building a small task manager application. Task manager, and we're going to link a style sheet for this, styles.css. I'm going to say styles.css. So let's quickly create our markup. So I'm going to have a wrapper div, and inside we're going to have a heading, which is going to just say task manager, and then we're going to have a form. We're not going to have an action, and we're going to have an input, and inside of that, let's say placeholder, which will be I want to, and let's make this a placeholder, and then we're going to have a list of items that we want to do, and let's add some dummy data here. So I want to exercise, and I want to spend time with family. Yeah, so if you go over here, okay, so let's do some basic styling for this. So we're going to first set the margin, okay, 0, and padding 0. Then we're going to have our wrapper, And for that, we want to set a width of 600 pixel and height of, I guess, 50 vertical height. And then body, we will make it a flex, align center, and then justify content center. And one last thing, yeah, we want to change the background color to a slight gray. And we're going to make this white. Yep. So here it is. Now let's style the input. So we want to give it a border of 1 pixel solid and the slight gray color we used before. And let's give it a padding of 5 pixel, a font size of 22 pixels. And let's take a look. Yeah, and also let's make it lock. And width 100%. Yeah, so that's a bit better. Let's give some padding to the wrapper, 10 pixels. And let's also give our H1 some margin. So let's give it a margin top of 15 pixel and a margin bottom of 15 pixels as well. Yeah. Let's repeat that for the form. Margin bottom 15 pixels. Yeah, I don't think we need this because we already have the padding. Yeah. And for the list, so we'll set list style type, we'll set to none. And for the individual list items, we will make them width 100%. And I guess let's give it a border bottom of 1 pixel solid and CD, CD, CD. And let's give them a padding of 5 pixels, I guess. Yeah, so this looks okay. Yeah, I think this is okay. And for the UL, let's give it a width of, I guess, 200 pixels. And yeah, so what we want to do next here is, yeah, let's give it a background to see where it is. So let's make it black. Yeah, so let's make it, I guess, 180. Yeah, so what I want to do here is I want to overflow scroll so that it doesn't overflow. And let's add some more items. So if we add li star 10 with the content lorem 10. Yeah, so it'll scroll now. So let's go back and remove that background color. So we should be good now. And now let's go about one last thing. I want to also have a remove link here. So maybe a button which will delete it. So let's say remove, and it should be on every list item. So let's see how we can go about styling that. Okay, so first of all, we need to make it a flex, justify content, space between.
And so we need to make it box sizing border box to make it not scroll horizontally. And for the remove, let's style the button. We will give it a background of red, remove the border color of white. Oh no, let's give it some padding, 5 pixels. And I guess let's make it maroon. Border radius, 5 pixels. Yeah, I guess we can work with that. So this should be good. And now let's hook this all up. So first of all, let's go ahead and create our X data. But instead of doing this inline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a function here, tasks app, and I'm going to create that function in a separate JavaScript file. So I'm going to say tasks app function, and we're going to return an object from this function, tasks app. And let's go over here to make sure that, yeah, so we need to link that in. So we're going to call the script. Source is app.js. Okay. So let's do a tasks. It's going to be an array. And there's going to be these items. And let's make it title. Each task has a title. And let's say I want to buy groceries, and let's also give ourselves a boolean completed, whether it's true or not. So it's going to be a boolean. And let's have another one. I want to go to the park, and let's make that true. And yeah, let's try and bring that in. And what I want to do is get rid of this, and inside of this we want to have a template. We'll use X4. I'm going to say task in tasks, and here we will repeat our allies. And for the text we will use task.title, and guess we don't need anything else apart from the button. So I guess we can put the button here, remove, and see how it looks. Yeah, no, it's not gonna work. The button. So if we do this, I think we will get an error. Want to go to the park. Yeah, so we need to do it like this. So inside of li, we'll create a new span. Yeah, so this is the way it's supposed to be. Sorry. So we're going to hook up this click. Let's say remove task, and it's going to be task. We can do it like this. So if we want to get the index, we can, separate that, and let's pass the index through, and let's create that remove task method here, and let's accept the index. And what we can do now is we can say this tasks dot splice, and we want to start at the index, and the count should be 1. And let's try it. So if we click remove, it removes the item. Now let's go and see how we can add another item. And then we will look at how to mark an item as completed, and it should be it. So we want to listen for the submit event on this and say create task, and we will go and create that function, create task. And before we are able to create the task, we need to bind the value of that field. So it's going to be empty by default, and then we will just do x model, and we'll say form.title. And when that button is clicked, what we want to do is we want to say this.tasks.push, and we're going to push in a new object. The title is going to be this.form.title, and the completed is going to be false by default. And let's try it out. Yeah, but we need to prevent using the prevent modifier on this. So if we enter, yeah, sure enough, we see the. So a couple of things that we need to do here is we need to, one, clear out the text field after the task has been pushed. And second, if you notice, like if you go here and press enter, it's going to keep creating empty tasks. So we need to add a check here that if this.form.title, it's it has a truly value, then we should do this. Otherwise, we should just ignore that submission. And yeah, you can also remove these. And now let's look at how to mark some as completed. Okay, so let's see if in order to bind a class, yeah, before binding, let's just look at if this was a completed, if a list item has a completed class. We'll do li.completed, and we want to strike through the text. So yeah, let me just quickly check CSS strike through. Yeah, so we need to, yeah, we need this, the line through property. And if we go here, we'll do text transform line through, and let's see. Oh, let's see the text. Oh, actually, it's text decoration. Okay. Yeah. So we want the tasks that are completed to have a line through them. And in order to do that, what we can do is use class binding in Alpine, which we can do so by creating an object here and provide the name of the class, and then as the property name, and then a Boolean value, whether this class should be applied or not, which should come from the task completed. And yeah, we have this task completed, and this is not completed. Okay. And now let's quickly implement the completion. And in order to do that, let's add another button here for complete. And it should only, actually, let's use a template here. And it should only show if task is not completed, then it should show, otherwise it shouldn't show. Yeah, and we need to wrap these in a div so that they become, they can be justified between. And maybe I should, change the color of this button, but I don't think that's important. So let's do a click and let's say complete task and then index. Yeah, and if we go back and say complete task index, and we can do this dot tasks index dot completed equals true, and I think that should work. Yes, and I think let's add an a not complete button as well. So let's add a new template. I think we can use an X else and a similar button. Not complete and not complete task. Oh, so I guess there is no X else. So we could just do the opposite condition here and not complete task, and just set it to false. Okay, complete, not complete, not complete. Yeah. And I guess the line through should be on the span just, not the whole through. Yep. And if we wanted to add another task, we can do that as well. If we wanted to remove a task, we can do that. Yeah. So I guess this is it for this quick crash course on Alpine. And please, if you found this useful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.